Welcome, adventurers. Today on Rebel Then King, we are continuing the most rewarding part of each class. So if you haven't seen part 1 yet, go ahead and check that out now. And if you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, you might want to go ahead and do that too. And if at any point you decide you like this video, well, there's a button for that. And if you think I've missed anything about any of these classes, go ahead and leave a comment. As a reminder, we're going over the most rewarding, not necessarily best parts of each class, so these are some things that you won't get to do that often, but when you do, you feel very rewarded. Last time we left off with the Magus, which brings us today to the Monk. For the Monk, I'm going to say that landing 4 strikes in one turn is the most rewarding, if not absolutely ridiculous thing that you can do. Remember, due to the core class ability, Flurry of Blows, you get to make 2 strikes with 1 action. You only get to do this once per turn though, but that does leave you with 2 actions to do, well, 2 more strikes if you would like to. I normally don't recommend doing this, but there is just something fun about being able to do so. The dice do need to be in your favor, but if you land all 4 strikes in your turn, I can almost guarantee you will get a standing ovation from your fellow players, and your GM is going to stand up and flip the table over in frustration. As an Oracle, I say if you can enjoy all of the positives that your curse has to offer without suffering the negatives, then you are going to be very rewarded, because this won't necessarily happen all of that often. Remember, as an Oracle uses their focus spells, their revelation spells, they activate their curse, and that curse progresses and you get benefits, but you also get some penalties and drawbacks from it. So for example, if you were the Curse of Creeping Ashes, well, let's just hope that the enemy doesn't make you use fortitude saves by poisoning you, for example, because you do suffer a penalty to your constitution-based checks, which does include fortitude saves. But then let's say that monster attacks and misses due to the concealment that is offered to you by the moderate level of the curse. You've done it. You've enjoyed the good without any of the bad, and you can tell the Oracle critics like me to stop worrying so much. As a psychic, it can be very difficult to time to know when to unleash your psyche. And that's why I say that perfectly timing Unleash Psyche is the most rewarding thing about this class. Remember, if a psychic casts a spell on a previous turn, they can unleash their psyche as a free action on a turn. They get to enjoy some benefits, some special actions that are offered to them from their subclass, and they can add some extra damage to their spells. But this only lasts 2 rounds, and then afterwards you cannot unleash psyche again, and you're actually stupefied. So if you do this too early in an encounter, well, then you end the encounter in a pretty bad state. If you wait too long in the encounter, you might not really get to use any of the benefits that Unleashed Psyche has to offer you. That's why if you are maybe 2 rounds into what ends up being a 4-round encounter, you Unleash Psyche, you get 1 round enjoying the benefits, and then another round where maybe you are the one to bring down the enemy due to your heightened state. That's going to feel great. Let's take a step out of combat for a second and talk about the Ranger abilities that don't actually have to do with their Hunter's Edge combat abilities. Remember that with Hunter's Prey, you also get a +2 circumstance bonus to perception checks to seek your prey, and a +2 bonus to survival checks to track your prey. So imagine using those tracking and perception checks to track a bear, see it setting up an ambush for you, and go around. It's kind of a lot better than being ambushed by a much higher level creature, right? When it comes to those sneaky rogues, I'm going to go with getting in that surprise attack. Now remember that sneak attack is sort of the core rogue feature, where if an enemy is off guard to them for any reason, they get to apply some extra damage depending on the weapon they're using and the type of rogue that they are. Doesn't matter for this video. The surprise attack is a little bit trickier though. If a rogue uses stealth or deception for their initiative roll, and they beat the initiative of other creatures they act before them, well, those creatures are off guard to them, and they will be able to apply that sneak attack extra damage, even if they're not in a flanking position or haven't done a feint. Given that you don't always get to use stealth or deception for initiative, and you aren't guaranteed to beat the initiative rolls of your enemies, this isn't going to happen that often, but it sure feels great when it does. And now for those smooth, spontaneous spellcasters, the sorcerers. I'm going to go with using all of the spell slots on the same spell. It's kind of ridiculous, but it is why you play as a spontaneous caster, to be able to totally change your plans and just go with what's working. Sometimes you find yourself in an encounter and everyone is flailing against the monster, usually due to some resistances or even immunities that the monster has, but maybe you have the perfect spell that is just walloping that thing and that monster can't do anything about it. So you watch all of your allies be pretty unsuccessful in a turn, and then you use that spell again. And then you repeat and you just say, you know what, it's working, and you use that spell a third time. It sure feels good to be able to just do that and have it work and not have to worry about preparing to do so at the beginning of the day. So take that, wizards. When it comes to the summoner and their Eidolon friends, I'm going to again take a step out of combat to talk about exploration and the Evolution Surge focus spell, though technically you could use this in combat too, now that I think of it. We do focus on combat a lot, but remember that there are things you can do in exploration that would be quite handy and made much easier with this Evolution Surge focus spell. Like, you can give your Eidolon a swim speed so it can get somewhere you can't. You can give it dark vision so it can spot something you can't. And these types of activities in exploration mean you're going to find clues and maybe loot that you would have otherwise missed. And I think it's for that reason that this has to be the class feature that is the most undervalued and most rewarding when it actually works out. The most rewarding part about a swashbuckler is quite similar to the most rewarding part about a psychic, as it has to do with timing your special abilities. The swashbuckler, the most rewarding thing is finishing a fight with a finisher. Remember, when you have panache as a swashbuckler, you have extra speed, you gain some bonuses to your certain actions, depending again on the type of swashbuckler you are, and you get to apply some extra damage with your strikes. You also get to use finishers. Now, these do a lot of damage, but you lose panache afterwards. So if you go for a finisher and you miss, well, that's not going to be great, because then you're in a no longer heightened state sitting right next to the enemy. But if you go for that finisher and you land and you do a bunch of damage and that finishes the fight, you feel pretty darn validated at that point. For the Thaumaturge, nothing is more rewarding than being able to apply mortal weakness to multiple enemies. Remember that if a Thaumaturge successfully exploits a vulnerability on an enemy and discovers a mortal weakness, and there are multiple enemies of that same type, the Thaumaturge gets to apply that mortal weakness to all of those enemies without having to exploit vulnerability again. This won't happen all that often, but when it does, you will deal massive amounts of damage after taking just a single action to set yourself up. Due to the witch changes in Player Core 1 in the remaster, I'm going to talk about the familiar and how using all 4 of your familiar abilities in an adventuring day is the most rewarding part about a witch. Remember, a witch's familiar has 3 familiar abilities that are from the standard set, and these are things you get to pick and choose and prepare every single day, and it is 1 more than the 2 that most familiars have. But the witch's familiar also has a 4th ability that happens only when the witch is casting or sustaining a hex, and this is something that is unique to each witch patron, each subclass. So imagine having a familiar that doesn't take damage on a save they make due to damage avoidance, and helps you bluff your way past something due to partner in crime, allows you to use an extra cantrip in a day due to cantrip connection, and then you've got the familiar of Flowing Spirit, so you are able to use your familiar for flanking maneuvers in combat. It's tough to do, to know exactly what you're going to be needing that familiar for in a day, so picking the right ones and making sure to remember all of them and use them in an adventuring day means you are getting great utility out of this rather unique class feature, this super enhanced familiar, and it is very rewarding to do so. So make sure to focus on that as a witch, because it really is what makes you you. That and the really cool hexes that you have, I suppose. And now, finally onto the wizard, I'm going to go with preparing the perfect prepared spell casting day. Remember, as a prepared caster like the wizard, you have to pick which spells you want to use in a day and how many times you are going to use them. you are not nearly as flexible as that sorcerer we talked about earlier. And also remember that as a wizard, you can cast more spells than any other class in a day. For an explanation on that, check out my sorcerer versus wizard video. This all means it can be tough to end your day without some unused spell slots. Believe me, I'm playing as a wizard, and this certainly happens. I will prepare some mental spells and then end up going against mindless creatures, and I just simply cannot use those spells. So when you do, especially if you kind of maybe know what's coming up, and you grab some spells that you don't use that often, combine them with some of your go-to spells, and you use every single one to great effect, you will feel so vindicated for choosing this class. Well, that is all for this 2-part series adventures. Let me know if there's anything I missed that you think would be more rewarding about playing one of these classes, or if there's just another really fun thing about these classes that you enjoyed that I didn't mention. Until then, remember, every time I get through a day playing as my wizard, who I still enjoy playing as, a part of me is pretty glad that my other character, a bard, is a spontaneous spellcaster.